Hey, welcome back to Shadow Shorts, where every weekday at noon Eastern, I bring to you a short conversation with an expert or thought leader in the realm of innovation for the built environment. My name is Jeff Echols. I'm a senior advisor and the head of marketing for Shadow Partners. Today's conversation is no different. I think you're going to be really interested in the conversation today because we're going to take a little bit different approach to a conversation that we've had before about venture capital, about startups in the built environment world, but this is the point of view from the design side. So I'm looking forward to this conversation today with co-managing partner of JB&B, Scott Frank. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Jeff. Happy to be here.
Glad that you're here. Before we went live, we were talking about the fact that you're no stranger to innovation in this world, in this space. We've talked about IP, inside of firms, and JB&B is a large engineering firm. You've got plenty of IP of your own, but you were talking about the fact that there may need to be a little bit different focus or more attention in certain areas from startups in the design world. So tell me more about your outlook and your insights regarding startups and investing in startups in the design world.
Yeah, sure. Maybe I'll just give a little context that some of your
Yeah,
viewers
absolutely.
might be interested in. Our kind of my view on this, this area of our industry and our practice. It goes back some time. Um, we were founding members of what at the time was called the International Alliance for Interoperability, which was the predecessor to the Building Smart Alliance today, and the creator of the IFC standard. To any of the BIM wonks out there who might know that data exchange standard, but back then it was a vision of open standards that's enabling interoperability. And as I said, that goes back quite a few years, and we've really tried to push as much as we could. And I'm thinking about just an interesting anecdote to this group. We had a collaboration with Autodesk at the time of the design of the Freedom Tower post 9/11 in New York City that we were fortunately, in unfortunate circumstances, privileged to be the design engineers for. And we did most of that through DD on a beta version of Revit at the time. We were determined to bring BIM to large commercial projects, and that was quite an undertaking and made some Autodesk executives kind of nervous at that point. So it's with a lot of passion and forethought about as we look to where we are today. And as you and I discussed, we've dipped our toe in the water a few times with startup ventures, a couple that we've seeded and have worked out in various ways. And so we feel like we've learned a few of the lessons about what that's all about. But yeah, to your question and your point, I'm very excited, as I know you all are, in Shadow Ventures, and as it's been said so many times, this is a great time for seed stage venture. And but I was thinking recently, I was going through the portfolio of Shadow companies and just looking at the spaces they're in, and it's quite a diversity, of course. But what struck me is that, is not entirely unexpected, I think, but many of the use case scenarios that are being automated, are pretty narrowly defined, and they center more to me on the kind of physical asset side or on the build side or the build space. And yes, there are some they're doing great things from a from a design standpoint, but I think the big nut to crack is, and I think it is a little more messy, is the design phase, and in particular maybe in the in the commercial institutional space, maybe away from single family small buildings, but the large projects. And I'm particularly excited by a couple things. This confluence that we're going to see, I think, in this industry, as you know, in a time when capital is really flowing into digitization of the AEC space. But I think the intersection, the timing of what AI is going to do for us from in the kind of the knowledge management sector or part of this, um, combined with, I don't know about you, but I've been fortunate to have some kind of deep kind of deep dives into the Apple Vision Pro headset. And I'm just lit up about what I think may be possible for designers. Um, past what you've seen to date of, kind of more just renderings and virtual walkthroughs, kind of virtual painting of virtual spaces, on a screen for visual consumption by stakeholders. But to now bring, kind of an augmented reality environment to design professionals, architects, engineers who were involved with the design process, with kind of this, what I think, and the definition I like to hear about the earlier impacts that we'll see from AI, which is, think of it as an assistant, as a digital
Mhm.
assistant, who can in real time bring the wisdom of the master of 30 years, 40 years, all the code subtleties and all the best practices, all that to bear in real time to a younger, earlier career professional. And I think this mode with activating kind of an enhanced reality kind of mode, I think it could be amazing. So yeah, so I'm excited for, I hope the time is right. It feels like we're getting there. It feels like the startup communities, picking the low hanging fruit, and that's great, and that'll be terrifically, add terrific value. But the big problems to be solved still remain, and
Mhm.
they're hairy. And but I hope that maybe a couple of these breakthrough technologies will really be the springboard that we need to really start to launch that part of it.
Yeah. That's super interesting because I think you're exactly right. We're we're teetering on this edge, right? And this is no surprise to anybody, right? Generations age, they move through the profession, and we're just in a point in time where there seems to be a bigger gap between generations that are moving close to retirement and the new leaders, the upcoming leaders. And so us Generation Xers are are a relatively small generation, and quickly being overtaken by younger generations. And I think that idea of knowledge transfer is critically important. How are we going to transfer the knowledge? How are we going to pass down the wisdom, knowledge, experience of someone with 30, 40 years in the field to someone that's just, a handful of years past their licensure or something like that? And that's intriguing to think about that as a problem that's going to be addressed. It's needed, obviously, but be addressed by some of these technologies. And you're right, we're thinking about them a lot in terms of the build, the deliverable side. So that's a great point to bring up.
And just to emphasize, really amplify your point, I was having a conversation recently with a young engineer, a college,
Hmm.
undergraduate engineer who's contemplating career choices, and was asking me about, the built environment kind of space, and one of the points I made was, how many? I'm sure there are many others, but what strikes me that's a little bit unique about the built environment, engineering in particular, but I think design in general, even architecture is no different, where you're coming into a profession where that is rapidly integrating, innovating, and being digitized, and employing state of the art technology now finally, but where also you need to be a subject matter expert on what were the innovations 100 years ago, 100 years ago. And in like the engineering space, I mean, we still, joining pipes together is still a very important and critical function in this industry, and one that we struggle with still to this day, just like architects, no offense to my friends, struggle with making roofs that don't leak water, right? And how many
Exactly.
millennium have humans been trying to build roofs, right? And so that you come into it needing to be digitally astute and state of the art on, if you're going to be on a development side and coding, of course, but just as a user even, think of that, kind of perspective you need as you need a contemporary education and be adroit at that. And then you need to be a master of 10 decades
Mm.
worth of very smart people working out lots of hard problems and incorporated into a lot of national standards and so forth. And I think that is somewhat unique. And so it just reinforces, putting aside the demographic shifts and the large baby boomer generation moving out, and even us, soon to be out. Um, but I think it just, this whole area of knowledge management really looms large. And I know firms that are, I think are, positioning themselves for success have recognized this and are investing, like our firm is as well, into this, this very important organizational function, which is how do you systematically um, really incorporate those lessons learned into standard practice, right? It's not enough to just get the lesson recorded and up into the intranet in your firm. That's not enough, right? That's
Right.
the first step of probably a dozen to really bring value to it. And we're just going to need automation and smart tools to help us. And it feels like, yeah, this may be, the time
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, to call it knowledge management is exactly right. Right. Yeah, we can. I don't have one within arm's length, but we can have all kinds of books, right, with lots and lots and lots of knowledge. But I still need to be able to find the information when I need it, at the point that I need it, and have it explained because it's, maybe it was written in such a way, or maybe it doesn't have exactly the right or same application. So how do I iterate on that? Yeah, that's fascinating. Um,
And one of the points that KP Reddy makes astutely too is that, and our clients are not satisfied
right.
with how much time it takes us to, still reach for some of the volumes that are sitting behind me, go on an intranet, digest a 1,000-page PDF of a new code, et cetera, et cetera. um, it's really not satisfactory.
Hmm.
And this idea of, one of the defined terms in the field of knowledge management, which is is an academic
Hmm.
field. I mean, certainly it is born out of the petroleum industry. As I understand it, from the early offshore oil platform projects, um, for obvious, reasons of benefiting from lessons learned, and there was capital then to really kind of develop the quasi theory around it. But findability, right?
Mm.
Findability is a defined term. And the Google search, that search on your internet, that's the infancy of it. But now, in fact, I was just before this, on the way to work today, I was listening to a podcast by the brand Upcode, which
Mm-hmm.
we all know about, and
Yep.
and they're having some challenges, I know, legally with the standard making organizations, but they're really leaning into AI and just how
Right.
a large language model can be so effective
Right.
for users, for designers, for practitioners, for code authorities, to be able to just really bring that knowledge to bear on a particularly refined problem. And it seems like those LLMs are kind of built for this. Um, yeah, and I'm encouraged too. I don't know about you, but just as we're all learning more about AI this year, and it's starting to understand kind of the stack model for
Hmm.
AI, which seems I don't know, I'm seeing more of, and that there's a few layers to this, and one
Right.
of the layers will be kind of this micro, I forget the term, but kind of the like the desktop model that's going to run with your firm specific
Right.
IP and content in
Right.
conjunction with maybe an industry trained model that's sitting on top of a large language model, right? And that kind of, I'm happy to see that at least it's accessible as a construct and a taxonomy. But now you can kind of see, okay, here's a place for startups to plug in, help a firm like ours build that third layer in this stack, in this AI stack, to take everything that we have as a store internally and bring that to bear, with a more of a natural language interface. Seems, yeah, really, really promising.
Yeah, there's a couple of points there that really resonate with me. I mean, the uh, um, the idea of what do we have that's specific, right, to ours. Sure, we could use Bard or Chat GPT, et cetera, but what about our specific IP, et cetera? And the idea that you shared earlier about clients not being, I mean, if there aren't There are some firms that are doing surveys, that are doing post project surveys and learning, getting the feedback from their clients, and there are some that are not, but they're finding that, it's like I tell my students a lot of times, there aren't a lot of people that want to hire an architect or an engineer or go to the doctor or hire an attorney. They just want to feel better, have this problem solved, et cetera, right? That's what
Yeah,
they're after,
yeah,
which, indicates a certain level of dissatisfaction. And, you mentioned KP Reddy, who's our CEO. He and I have been kicking this around a lot. I'll be in Atlanta next week speaking at an event talking about AI. And we agree that the client side is probably number one. It may be the blind spot that a lot of us on the design side are missing, right? We're focusing on design, we're focusing on deliverable, but what do the clients want? How do we make that
yeah.
client experience better? What are they going to demand? One of the things that I think about a lot is what what's your insurance carrier, your errors and omissions, your liability insurance? What are they going to demand? Um, what's the client's insurance carrier going to demand? I think there are a lot of ways to look at this, and it's pointing towards technology. And I think you're right. There is low hanging fruit for some of these startups to come in and solve some of these issues.
We try to be students here of Clay Christensen, the late Clay Christensen, and his disruption theory. And you know, in that parlance, you look at our market and you say, "Wow, this is not a market that's overserved by the incumbents. It is not overserved. This is an underserved market." And then in further to that theory, which is that to the extent that this is disruption, and I think we all think it will be, and it'll change business relationships, and some of them, firms like us aren't going to exist any longer, and so forth. But to the extent that disruption, in that model, happens from the low end, and it's something that's not perfect, but it's just good enough, but it's very inexpensive. And I think is certainly held up in a lot of industries and a lot of sectors, right? If you look at the history, and I think kind of what do you say? You look at the landscape here, and you say, yeah, I think that could be possible, right? I mean, how much is it going to cost to license, Microsoft's, AI LLM, and I'm sure Autodesk will have something soon, and then layer this. Someone will come up. Autodesk will come up with the industry specific trained version, right? That we'll all, subscribe to, and then hopefully the startup community can help us with, kind of the firm specific, um, IP. And boy, I don't know, does this the capital intensity of bringing those solutions to market at scale? I mean, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like there's a huge barrier there. So I do, again, another reason to be feel like to be optimistic. I'm not always considered an optimist. I'm often the glass half full kind of prerogative, but I can't help myself. I think the time, this next decade is going to be huge.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So one last question. I know we're in danger of this not being a short anymore. So let me ask you one last question. If you are someone that's innovating, if you are a startup founder or a potential startup founder, as you look out across this segment of the industry that we're talking about right now, what's one piece of advice that you have for somebody in on a way that they could find their niche or make some sort of specific impact?
Well, one thing I've observed is, the potential entrance to this market, and they've historically been to date, the larger corps, but they universally have made, fatal mistakes. And I think this is the mantra I've been repeating, would continue to, is that you need to appreciate my earlier point. You're coming into, even though it is a massive part of the U.S. economy, right? Our industry is as big as the automotive industry, and big players, look at that and they say, oh my God, look at this percentage of the U.S. economy that isn't even been barely touched by software. Great. and they all run and turn tail and run after a short order because they fail to understand that A, this is a very parochial market. It's regionalized, it's sector specific. And yes, in totality, it's large, but it's really it's a large population of small customized markets with stakeholders that serve all those roles in the entire life cycle of buildings. And so I think having that awareness is essential. And just to the point that, you know, the coupling with public regulation, we are a very regulated industry. And I always enjoy those exchanges. Not to go political at all, but my kind of libertarian friends in my industry. I'm like, you realize if there were building codes and all these standards and everything else, we really wouldn't need the design profession, right? You would not need us. And I think that is something very important, to have a healthy respect for the power of the status quo based on this legacy that is still with us. We don't need to worry about punch cards, right, to get software loaded into computers anymore, right? Like the beginning of our careers, right? Or our education, at least, not to
Yeah.
date us too much. But here, as I said, you still need to know, how does stick-built construction really work, and how does steel framing really happen, and how does large bore piping get installed, and from the logistics standpoint, get into a high-rise building. There's all that legacy. So my advice would be, to the potential founders out there, get a subject matter expert in the building space. I'm not saying it has to be somebody, well along in their career path, but someone with 10 years of experience who can bring a little bit of that wisdom, because I just think the planning otherwise can get really ahead of, over the tips of the skis, because it's going to take longer. It's going to be slower. The sell cycle in this industry is so long, and it's going to get better, but it's not going to change overnight. So there's a couple,
Yeah.
couple.
Oh, that's very well put. And that there's so much that we could unpack there, but you're exactly right. It's not the industry that you think it is. If you're looking at it from the outside with no experience in the industry, and I understand if you're one of my clients, someone I've worked with before, and I've told you your business is a business and it's no different than any other business. There are nuances to that. There are differences in the industry, and you just hit on a couple of really important ones. So, some great takeaways there. So, if you're a startup founder, um, and you want to get into this space, listen to what Scott was just saying, because it is important. It's possible. You can definitely make an impact, but there are some things you have to be aware of. So, Scott, thank you very much. Those are great insights. It's a great conversation today. I appreciate you sharing all of these. And for everybody else that's out there that's watching, either live or in some time shifted manner, we appreciate you. I'll be back again tomorrow with another Shadow Short, another conversation with an expert or thought leader in the realm of innovation for the built environment. And we hope to see you soon. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Jeff.